As you wish.
They want us woke, not awake. Let's get into it. Okay, so I've said on a few videos before this that I'm a fan of the filmmaker Aaran Perez. He's a Mexican-American, low-budget B-movie provocateur, and he is quite conservative, and he has his own kind of streaming site where it houses a number of films which lean more heavily into like the political angles, which I am presuming that don't get distribution deals because of that. The bulk of his other work is still has a sort of conservative stint, but it's generally more mainstream. So I joined this streaming site because I actually wanted to watch a recent film from him, which didn't end up being on there, but I thought I would check out the films that I hadn't seen that were on this site, and obviously these are the ones that are the more politically overt ones, shall we say. Now, I'd heard of this one before, and it is technically speaking a short film. It runs about just under 35 minutes. This one is actually available on YouTube, albeit a slightly edited version. But I watched the one on the website. I will leave a link to the YouTube version if you want to watch it. Anyway, so it's obviously made for a conservative or an American conservative base. So I don't think this is going to convince anyone who isn't that politically inclined to kind of change sides. And I think it obviously speaks to that kind of particular political mindset. But we're going to try and look at it as a film, and we'll talk about the kind of the politics stuff, but I do want to just look at it as can we judge it as a film, as a piece of entertainment outside of the politics, or is it too intrinsically meshed together? So what's the story? So it focuses on this woman who at one point was brought up in a kind of a liberal household, and she has now drifted rightwards into the conservative political camp, and a lot of it is lamenting the bad decisions that she has made in her view when she was a liberal. And then she ends up going on this kind of podcast with this other guy, and they're kind of talking about, you know, anti-woke stuff basically, and they end up getting kind of kidnapped, chained up to this kind of remote, seemingly abandoned factory, and there's this kind of steampunk Nazi guy, and he's there wanting to do bad things ultimately. So it's up to our protagonists to fight back. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So the movie is about half and half set up in regards to, you know, showcasing these characters and their, you know, lamenting about their political beliefs. And then the second half is about this kind of, where the action is really. And it's kind of, I guess you would say, slightly sort of science fiction-y, I suppose. Let's talk about what works. Now, there's a reason why I like the Aaran Perez movies. I find his visual stylings quite compelling. He's quite a good cinematographer. I find his visual storytelling quite interesting, and it's true of this one. He uses a lot of the same locations. This factory I've seen in a number of Aaran Perez movies, but I do like the kind of like the bright sunshine he puts on his kind of washed out effect, although less so in this one, to be fair. You know, and he has kind of like over the top like villains and stuff, and kind of interesting sort of sci-fi and horror ideas. And that is true with this one. I found this kind of steampunk Nazi guy quite a interesting looking antagonist, and quite potentially an interesting character, or at least has the potential to be interesting, and we'll come on to that again. But, you know, it looks quite striking, and, you know, we have these kind of tussles in this kind of factory and stuff, and, you know, it's filmed relatively well in regards to that. So that was, you know, all pretty good. I feel that it needed a little more than that, if I'm honest. But I think, as I say, certainly visually it has some interesting stuff going on. It's not a particularly kind of gory film, or doesn't have a huge amount of narrative, but there's some interesting sequences in the movie that I think, you know, visually speaking, at the very least, look okay. And I do think this movie is very much speaking to, obviously, the conservative base, and it's bringing up obviously a lot of kind of right-wing talking points, and kind of, you know, going through those sort of various different elements of that kind of ideology and things like that. Now, they do actually have an attempt to have an alternate voice in regards to, we have a caller that calls, when they're the first half of this movie, these two people are doing this podcast, and we have someone who, from a liberal standpoint, calls up. So I appreciate the fact that they do try and have a counterbalance. I do think, however, that's more there to, you know, give our kind of characters arguing points, if that makes sense. To kind of like say their point against the counterpoint, if that makes sense. So they are, when you hear like someone from the left kind of saying, oh, but this, that, and the other, well, we can now address that because we have this caller that's called up and said that. And now we can have our rebuttal to that, so to speak. So that's kind of why I think it was there, really. I don't think it was a genuine attempt to have a balanced political movie. I think it was there to have, to give our characters responses to that. But at least there was at least an attempt here to have some type of discourse. And, I mean, again, looking at it from a story perspective, government or whoever this is, some type of shadowy cabal, you know, kidnapping political insurgents and kind of doing some type of, like, hunting game with them or something like that. An interesting idea. But let's talk about what doesn't work, and then we'll kind of come back to the politics. But let's talk about what doesn't work just on a film level. I think the story here is lacking. As I said, the movie's around 35 minutes, so it technically is a short film, but it's a reasonably lengthed short film. But I don't think in that time that it gives you enough context about the actual story here. This is a movie more interested in showcasing political ideals rather than telling an actual story. And I think a more successful movie can have political messages, but it not become the focus. Now, this is actually a critique that is levelled at a lot of sort of Disney movies and stuff, is that they put the message first and then kind of put a film around it. But that's what this is doing. So, you know, there is that, it has to be said that this is kind of exactly the thing that I think sometimes the Conservatives will complain about. So the story is lacking because of that. I mean, this kind of, I guess, stormtrooper looking guy, no idea what he actually wants. I mean, he sort of chains these people up. Don't really know why. I mean, why not? It seems like he's keeping them alive for a reason. We see like skeletons and stuff, so there are obviously people have died there, but it's never really clear about what it is he's intending to do or want to do, or the purpose of it. He's just there, keeps them alive for a certain amount of time and eventually kills them. Why he doesn't kill them straight away, don't know. It doesn't really go into it. What is his intention? What does he actually plan to do with them? It's never really explained, because our protagonist escapes before the sort of the motivation is really kind of explained. It's someone else that he's talking to at one point, but we never kind of see them again. So this movie feels like it's kind of short-changed. Now, I have seen that there is potentially a longer version, but at least on IMDb it rates the running time at over 2 hours, but on their actual website this movie is 35 minutes, so I don't think it is a longer film, or at least the finished product of it. Maybe it was intended to be once, I don't know. But as it stands, as its current form, I feel that it's a little bit nonsensical just in regards to the plot. I am not talking about the politics here. I am just talking about the plot. So I found this movie really lacking in regards to kind of narrative here. And then even some other elements, you know, this female main protagonist, she's kind of like giving us her kind of backstory, the first half of the movie, and she's like, oh, you know, I split up with my ex because he wanted to, or the schools were pushing transgenderism on their son, and he was okay with it whilst she wasn't, and he started to transition or whatever. But then we see that her son at the end, and he's just like, doesn't seem to that's not have happened, or that's been reversed or something. Again, it's just not, he's just not transgender anymore. So it's kind of like, it feels incomplete. Even in the story that it's telling, this movie does not feel like it's fully formed. And then ultimately, the bulk of the kind of the first half of the movie is just this woman going through a variety of political points, you know, talking points, and I'm thinking, okay, so, and again, this is like, I feel this is what the impetus of this movie is, and obviously, I would obviously most people on the conservative right in America, I guess these are things that these points that they would agree with, but it's almost like. So this is made for a conservative audience, which I totally understand, and you know, and I fully on board of. But it's just like, okay, well, you're just parroting like an echo chamber almost. Why not do something a little? You know, you can have those points in it, but it just seems like it's taken its time to lecture the audience about what these talking points are. But I honestly don't think it's like really in a position where it's going to change anyone. You're just, if you're watching this, you're probably going to be of that mindset anyway, and as such, you are already agreeing with it. So it almost feels like a waste to have that. Anyway, so I think the movie, just on a filmmaking perspective, is relatively weak. It has some good visuals, but the story-wise, it's really lacking, like really lacking. And then, as I say, that the politics side of stuff, that's obviously going to determine whether you're either going to press play on this one or not. Clearly, someone who is on a kind of a liberal base, you know, a Democrat, an American Democrat, whatever, is not going to be interested in this. And obviously, those on the sort of conservative side will be. But it's like, you know. So that's already going to kind of sort of make you decide if you're going to watch this or not. And then, as I say, it's the first half of this movie just feels like a lecture. It really does, and it's just like having a lecture disguised as a kind of a movie in a way, and a better way, in my opinion at least, where if you wanted to have a movie which is obviously serving the conservative base and the right-wing sort of like audience, is to certainly have a movie that embraces those ideals, but maybe have it more kind of organic in the story and not kind of stop to kind of lecture the audience, which I feel was just like, it affects the story, it affects the movie as a piece of entertainment. So, you know, I've got to say it's obviously very going to be a film whether you're going to want to watch this or not. It's going to be down to your own personal opinion. Purely looking at it as a film and judging it critically based on the film rather than the politics, I'm going to have to say a 3 out of 10, because I just think the story here is just kind of like pushed to the side, and really not, the narrative is totally unfocused. Some nice visuals, but that's really all I can say. Have you seen it? Would you see it? Please let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.